Hey YouTube, this is Steve. I've decided to come in front of the camera for this. Not what I usually do, but I was thinking I'd shake things up a little bit, and today I'm going to list my top 10 favorite NES games of all time. Now, when I say favorite, it doesn't necessarily mean I think they're the best 10 Nintendo games. In fact, there's a couple games on here that people would probably criticize heavily. But they're just games that mean a lot to me for one reason or another, and I appreciate, various things about them. So, let's get right into it. First, I have to give an honorable mention to the original Super Mario Brothers for Nintendo. Now, people might be upset that this doesn't rank on the actual list, but I was one of the kids who got a Nintendo quite a bit later than when it first came out, because I was born in 1983. And I remember enjoying it immensely, and it's the game that really turned me into a gamer, truthfully. But now, and it does stand the test of time, but if I had a choice, right now, would I play it versus any of these other games on the list? And the honest answer is no. I would rather play my choices here than the original Super Mario Brothers. That doesn't mean Super Mario Brothers isn't a terrific game. That's just how I feel about it. So with that out of the way, number 10, Faxanadu. Faxanadu is a 2D adventure game with platform jumping. My father and I found it in the bargain bin at the store. This was in the mid-90s. It was back when you could still find NES stuff at Funko Land. And, we found it, so took it back to his house, and we played that for the whole weekend. It got pretty far. It's an enjoyable game. The basic premise is that you're an elf, and the Elf King beseeches you to climb the world tree because the water has become contaminated and the dwarves have gone all crazy and declared war on the elves, and you have to figure out what's going wrong. So it can be hard at times, but it's still a very enjoyable game. A lot of people might compare it to Zelda 2. It does have some similarities, but that's it. It's just an enjoyable game. A lot of the art is very unique. It has a lot of greens and browns, and very earth-tony game. So if you have the opportunity, check out Faxanadu. It's a good game. Number 9, Romance of the Three Kingdoms. What can I say about this one? It's a strategy game, and it's one that I actually found at a garage sale across the street from my house when I was about 10 years old, I want to say. Romance of the Three Kingdoms is based on that ancient Romance of the Three Kingdoms novel from China. And the story of Romance of the Three Kingdoms, they're still making Romance of the Three Kingdoms games now. And it's the same story of ancient Han China, right around the fall of the Han Dynasty, that also formed the basis of the Dynasty Warriors games, if some of those might be more familiar to you. So whereas Dynasty Warriors is a hack and slash, you got Romance of the Three Kingdoms that comes at it from a strategy aspect. So if you like the Dynasty Warriors games, and you want to try a strategy element, and you have your Dynasty Warriors Empires games too, but Romance of the Three Kingdoms is going to be all of that, except without the hack and slash combat. Romance of the Three Kingdoms has a grid where you move your units around, like what you'd expect in a lot of older strategy games. So I was attracted to it. I thought the cover looked fairly unique. I had never really seen a NES game that looked like it. But then I got it home, and it was a little overwhelming at first because of the sheer amount of things that you can do. and it took me a little while to figure out how to save the game. But you know, you can train your troops, and back then I preferred to just sort of sit back and not engage in war that much if I could help it. I liked the idea of just building up my base, you know, taking care of my people, you know, ensuring that, you know, against floods, and building up my economy and things like that. And, you know, that shows today in my love of, you know, various base and settlement building games that I play once in a while. So, if you have the opportunity, check out Romance of the Three Kingdoms, or any of the, many of the other games in the series. Romance of the Three Kingdoms 3 for either the Super NES or Sega Genesis, I recommend highly. And then 7, 8, and 10 on the PlayStation 2. Number 8, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! I remember playing Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! For the first time, actually, as a teenager. It was just some random NES game we acquired, and I don't even remember where, but I remember playing it and having a good time with it. As a teenager, I could get all the way up to Soda Popinski before I started having difficulties. I remember using a Game Genie to get Infinite Super Punch, and I won a lot of fights that way, and even went all the way up to Mike Tyson. But I've never beaten Mike Tyson legitimately, so I'll admit that. I can't really say anything about Mike Tyson's Punch-Out that hasn't been said already. It's a fun game. You know, there's quirky opponents. You know, I'll give you a TKO from Tokyo. That's one thing that always stuck with me. So it's just a good boxing game, and frankly, it's better than a lot of more modern boxing games I've played, if you can believe that. And then, of course, Little Mac has received, you know, even more acclaim as one of the characters in the Smash series. So, yeah, I'm sure you could find a copy of Mike Tyson's Punch-Out!, or I'm sure there's a port of it somewhere on Wii U or the Switch, or, yeah. Mike Tyson's Punch-Out!, great game. Number 7, Metroid. Metroid was a game that I borrowed from a friend of mine back in the same time period when I owned Romance of the Three Kingdoms. So I took Metroid home, and I liked it immediately. It was a good game. I never beat it. I never got too far either. I think the furthest I got was getting an ice blaster. And I remember my friend at the time, I apparently had gotten further than him because he had never seen the ice blaster before. But I just, you know, I remember liking the gameplay a lot. But I also remember getting a little bit frustrated with not knowing where to go. And I didn't have, you know, Nintendo Power or anything like that because, you know, and I didn't have any of those books, and I didn't have any, like, older relatives or friends who were, like, really in the know, who were telling me, like, gameplay secrets and things like that. So I gave it back, and I haven't played Metroid since, and eventually I think that's one I ought to get back to. It's a great game. Number 6, Arkista's Ring. Now, this one's going to shock a lot of people based on putting it above very well-known and very highly decorated games like Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! And Metroid. But this is just how I feel about it, like I'm saying. It's about an elf girl named Christine who needs to go fight some great evil. That's as much as I ever understood about it. It's from a little game company called Sammy. I remember always seeing that little insignia on the game, but it's a top-down. It has a mild Zelda quality to it, and you can, instead of a sword, you use your bow and arrows. And then you can also get various power-ups like a thunder wand and a fire wand and things like that to take care of the various types of enemies. And it has a sort of a screen-by-screen sort of progression to it, where you defeat all the monsters on the screen and take care of all the objectives before moving to the next room, and then gradually you move on and defeat the boss. Now, this game's a little weird because there's 5 or 6 cycles where you play the game through constantly, but each time the game resets, the enemies get faster. So I don't think I ever made it further than 2 loops because it just got a little too crazy, and it's a lot to do in one sitting. But it's not a well-known game, and I never see Arkista's Ring come up on lists, even people's lists of like top 10 obscure games and things like that. But it's one that I highly recommend. Number 5, Little Nemo the Dream Master. Now, I know a lot of people like this game, even though it's not the easiest game, especially level 3 when you're riding the train. Even to this day, that level gives me agita, and I'm not afraid to admit it. But Little Nemo the Dream Master was a rental back when I lived in California, and my father and I played it, and it was an enjoyable game. It's about like all these adventures of Nemo when he's having dreams, and then in between each stage you show various little like mini cutscenes of Nemo like going to bed or not going to bed, as the case may be. And it has like all of these little quirky, fun characters that talk to you at the beginning of the stage. And the gameplay is fun. It's a platforming game, and you have to find all the keys in the level to unlock the door to the next stage. And then ultimately, you have to defeat the King of Nightmares. And unfortunately, I never got further than that giant bird in the last level. The one that's the boss that's like right before the very end boss. I never could beat him as a kid. I guess I didn't quite understand how to use the wand correctly, but that's a tale for another time. But Little Nemo the Dream Master, it's a good game, and if you have the chance to play it, absolutely do. Number 4, Shadowgate. Now, Shadowgate is a point-and-click adventure game, and it's one that my whole family played back when we lived in California. The whole idea of it is that you're this knight who is sent by the wizard Lakmir to stop the evil warlock lord, and you enter the dreaded Castle Shadowgate. And along the way, you pick up various items and things like that. It's also, you could consider it a puzzle game as well, because there's all these different little puzzles that you have to solve, and all these various traps you have to avoid, and some people might jokingly call it a death simulator because there are just so many ways you can die in Shadowgate. It is beyond amusing, and their picture of the Grim Reapers when you die is actually pretty terrifying. I remember it creeping me out as a kid. And the death music is also very memorable. So go somewhere right now and look up Shadowgate NES death music. It's terrific. And I've seen some orchestral arrangements of it, and it's very faithfully produced. And this game actually got a HD reboot back in 2014, which I played through, and it was very, very well done. But getting back to the NES version, there are just so many ways to die, and it feels very satisfying when you're struggling, trying to figure out like how do I open this door, or how do I beat this monster, or how do I get past this obstacle. There's tons of that in this game. So if you like figuring things out and don't mind dying a lot along the way, Shadowgate is a terrific game, and I recommend it highly, and I recommend the HD reboot as well. Number 3, The Legend of Zelda. Now, this one shouldn't really surprise a lot of people that it's high on the list. Legend of Zelda, there's really nothing I can say about it that'll do it justice. The Legend of Zelda series is one of the Mac daddies of gaming, even to this day. You got Breath of the Wild out, and then I've heard they've announced a Breath of the Wild sequel. You know, Zelda's not going anywhere anytime soon. But the original Legend of Zelda was another rental back when we lived in California. I remember taking it home, playing it with my dad, enjoying it immensely. I think we got up to level 4, the 4th labyrinth, before ending up taking it back to the video store. I've never actually beaten Legend of Zelda, and I'll tell you why. I acquired the game in my when I was around 11 or 12, and I played it a lot, and got I'm not sure exactly how far I got, but I remember being in a dungeon. I had gotten further than I'd ever gotten before, and I know I at least had the blue ring. And I remember going into the dungeon and those unique rooms of gray bricks with the ladders and bats where you get the dungeon special item. I remember going down and then up to get the item. Link holds up the item, da-na-na-na, and the game froze. And I admittedly cussed the TV out, cussed the NES out, and reset the game, and my file was gone. I was beyond irritated, and I was so put off by it and just so angry. Like, I didn't play Zelda at all for I think a good little while after that. But since that time, I haven't played the original Legend of Zelda again because it's just that hangs in my mind so much. But I mean, if there's a game that deserves to be gone back to and beaten, it's probably that one, but who can say when I'll actually get there. Number 2, Super Mario Bros. 3. Another game that really shouldn't surprise anyone. Super Mario 3, it's often called the best Mario game. Some people consider it the best NES game. And for even some other people out there, it's a contender for the best game ever made. So, yeah, and Mario is another one of those characters who's been around since the earliest days of Nintendo, and and he's not going anywhere anytime soon. You got Mario Odyssey, and you got Super Smash Brothers, you got Super Mario Kart. Like, there's more Mario. Like, you can't turn anywhere in the video game world without finding Mario somewhere. But Super Mario Bros. 3, another rental from my days living in California. Played it with my dad. Had a great time. Terrific game. I remember having to rent it a few times before we actually beat the entire game. And I remember having that Super Mario 3 strategy guide. And I didn't really need it to do a lot of the levels. The one main thing that I used it for was to get all the card combinations, or to you see, when you get that end spade on the map occasionally to play the flip the card game, there's like 8 different possibilities of what cards are there, and I would use that diagram to figure out where all the cards are. But yeah, Super Mario 3, it's just so much. It's just a colorful, well put together game. I mean, and then there's concepts from it. And they made a Super Mario 3 cartoon, which I watched. A lot of people didn't like it that much. I did. You know, I was a kid. I was really into Mario. I remembered spending a whole lot of time on World 3, Waterland, with my dad. For whatever reason, the water levels in World 3 seemed to trip us up a bit. But I remember liking World 4, Giant Land, a whole lot. And I remember finally beating the game with my dad. You know, finding our way through Bowser's Fortress and beating Bowser himself, where you have to sort of make him break the bricks in the floor. All great memories. So I have only good things to say about Super Mario Bros. 3. And now, my #1 favorite NES game, Final Fantasy. This might shock some people. How could I put Final Fantasy above Legend of Zelda, Super Mario Bros., Metroid? Well, that's just how I feel about it. Super Mario Bros. Turned me into a gamer. But Final Fantasy turned me into an RPG fanatic. Before playing Final Fantasy, the games I played were primarily action, platforming, and even 2D fighters and, other things. But I played Final Fantasy, and I was like, what have I been doing with my life? Now, I didn't play Final Fantasy until summer of 1997. I didn't have Final Fantasy back in the early days when I had my NES. I got it later at the farmer's market, and took it home, played it, and it was incredible. Just that opening screen where you build your party. I had never seen that in a game before. I'm like, look at this. I can make a party, a 4-character party out of these 6 different characters, these classes, and I can even put 2 of the same one if I want. And I spent so much time just playing through the early portion of the game with a set of 4 characters and then just starting a new record with another set of 4 characters, just trying out different combinations and different combinations and different combinations. That was just, I had so much fun with it. And then after that, I started finding all the Final Fantasy games I could get my hands on. I was eating them up like cereal. And I've actually done a top 10 Final Fantasy games, my personal top 10 Final Fantasy games. So definitely go check that one out. But I remember beating Chaos. I had a fighter, a red mage, white mage, and a black mage. Or I guess at that point in the game, knight, red wizard, white wizard, black wizard. And they were all 35 except for my white wizard, who was level 41. I remember letting the rest of my party die so I could level grind my white wizard in order to get more high-level spell slots to have more magic. That'll do it for the list. Let me know what your top Nintendo games are. I would love to talk about your choices or my choices, what you agree with, what you disagree with. Hey, if you have an opinion, drop it in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'm always playing games, and you never quite know what's going to end up on the channel, so stay tuned.